Suns fans, you know what time it is in the PHX.
Empire of the Suns.
Phoenix Suns.
Empire of the Suns.
The Empire of the Suns podcast is brought to you by Sonic. Drive to your nearest Sonic location and don't forget to order your half-price drink or slush anytime in the Sonic app.
Hello there, and welcome to the Empire of the Suns podcast. My name is Kellen Olson, joined as always by Kevin Zimmerman. What's up, man?
Howdy. We are coming to you, if you're looking on video, I'm like from a prison, but I'm actually just in a recording studio. We are having renovations at work, so I don't know if our studio will look the same or different, but yeah, we're doing it from remote times, and Kellen does not like that, I don't think, but we'll persevere here.
The vibes are abysmal right now. I can't remember the last time I was on an actual Zoom. I think it's been at least like 6 months. It's probably been the last time since we used it, but we now use a different form of video recording now when we do this. So I can't remember. And yeah, I wasn't really someone who was like the COVID stuff was obviously a horrible time for everyone, but it was like I just kind of haven't thought about it in a while, I guess. And like just seeing like the Zoom meeting loading thing and then like being launched into the thing was like kind of triggering for me. I'm not going to lie. But yeah, we're over Zoom today for the audio listeners. Our podcast studio is being renovated. And I think also that we are going to be doing a couple of these throughout the year, I think, because we have often longtime listeners know you and I's schedules continue to be more and more difficult to match up as the years go on, and we're only making that more and more significant right now with the show I got going on and everything. But it's a good time for us to be a Phoenix Suns podcast. The team is 7-1. They're off to what is tied for the best start in franchise history 3 different times. The Suns have done this. This is the 4th. And we can just start super broad in general and just kind of find the layers where we see fit. What do you attribute this to the most?
Having a good plan, good being the important word there. Look, we're going to run into the same things and to some degree that we did last year. It's like, KD, do you got to save us every game? There are periods of games that go off the rails. There's just like, hey, does Devin Booker and Kevin Durant have to play this much, and where does Bradley Beal fit and all this? And we'll get to that, but I think like it's just mind-blowing how simple basketball has become for this team. And you wrote about it yesterday, coming off that win against the Miami Heat, where Kevin Durant is just spamming very simple plays. It's matchups. It's things that we talked about, like can't win you games completely. And we saw them flounder last year, but they're winning these games now doing these same things because they're together in doing the simple, if that makes sense. So I think that's where I'm at. Like this team obviously has a lot to figure out, still finding what pieces work when, but they're more confident. There's more buy-in. You look at how guys are playing defense specifically. Another thing you wrote about this week, Bradley Beal in particular, but also Kevin Durant, Devin Booker. Like there's just a lot.
Kevin was crazy. And like when they went down 15 last night, he went nuts on that end on top of the crunch time stuff.
Yeah, so I think it's just like empowering individuals. You will figure out the team stuff later, but for the most part, individuals are empowered right now. Even Nurk, who last podcast a week ago, we talk about like we don't want to get into trade rumors right now, and then he comes off his best game for this podcast.
Yeah, and he's played really well defensively in these 2 games as well. I think the way that I'll start is by seeking out the Suns fans listening, which is the majority of our listenership. I think we got some like random NBA fans, some random casual Suns fans perhaps out there. But for the diehards, I would say there are just so many reasons to be optimistic right now about this team. And that is with them playing like, okay.
Yeah.
They've been fine. I say that because the script now for Suns games is play somewhere between below average to above average for the majority of the game, meaning that they weren't terrible They weren't awesome. They weren't good. They weren't poor. It was just somewhere in like that cloudy middle area. Then be awesome and incredible for 3 minutes, 6 minutes, 8 minutes, whatever it is, and then just win in crunch time. That has been the formula so far, and they've been doing it through KD, who has been awesome. And like, I don't know if he's been as good as Bradley Beal though, Kevin. I don't know if he's been as good as Brad. Joke. Kevin's been
Joke.
Kevin's been amazing. I'm sorry. I can say arguably in front of something and then get my face all over the internet for 48 hours. I seek peace with you, KD stands. I promise. I promise if you go back and read my receipts that I am very open about my appreciation of the greatness of Kevin Durant. But, 145-second clip goes viral. Not viral on Twitter, but just catches the right part of that part of the internet. And there we go. He's been amazing. And like the thing is, you compare it to last year, and this is not a way to look down on what he's done this year, but remember last year he had 21 straight games when he scored 25 points or more. Like, this is just Kevin Durant, man. He's incredible. He is an amazing basketball player who continues to, it's like such the easy standard thing to say, but for him to keep doing this at the age that he is at, where he is continuing to produce at this astronomical level and impact the game in astronomical levels. Like, the turnovers have been a bit more prevalent, especially like when we were talking about that last week. And the thing that I'm alluding to is I said that Brad, in my opinion, was playing the best of anyone on the team through whatever it was, 4 games. And the majority of like my point was like Kevin's turnovers were just so detrimental to the team. And like that 4-game sample size, there were 2 where his turnovers were just killing him. And I thought the flow, especially in those first 2 games and at the end, was rough. But they've already improved on that. And you compare it to last year, just like subtle little changes. Like, it was sort of the same thing last year, but they were giving Kevin the ball on the block. Remember, the mid post isolations were taking place on the other side of the floor towards the baseline. They've reconfigured the spacing to the middle of the floor now, making the rotations harder in different sort of areas, because the Lakers really stumped that in the second game last year, where they scored like 8 points in the fourth quarter. And then that sort of, I'll call it a blueprint, but I'm sure any half knowledgeable basketball coach or former basketball coach can say like that's a simple thing that the Lakers did, and every other team knows to do that in that kind of situation. But they just broke the rotations in a way where even doubling on Durant wasn't yielding the Suns good results. And now they've figured this out in the middle of the floor. He's 10 of 15 from the field in clutch time minutes, and he's been able to find lanes to the basket more. He's scoring at the rim more, which is a huge deal right now, because they are, I don't know what the updated numbers are after last night's action, but they were last coming into the night at the amount of shots they take at the rim. Some of that is padded by being one of the best teams in the league getting to the free throw line, but he has been fantastic, and they've been able to win through it this time. So that, to me, is where I would start with just the biggest difference compared to last year, and what has led to this year is that Kevin is Kevin. He's freaking incredible. And this time they are winning through that. They were, when that streak ended, Kevin, they were 14-14 last year.
Yeah.
They're 7-1 right now. Like the difference is pretty remarkable. And he's like, that was like a nuclear sort of level that he was at in terms of his consistency scoring the ball. And he's been just as good, if not better, but just in different ways, the defense, things like that. The turnovers, he had 6 last night, a couple got away from him. I think in the mid-third, when the game started to shift, he had 2 turnovers that were like, okay, they've lost this game. They had like 3 bad defensive possessions. I was like, okay, they're done here. And then they went on that crazy run, found their defense, and then got the ball to him late. So the formula, do you think it's replicable? I think that's the thing. Do you think how far can this go before we need to see them find, I don't want to say more consistency, because I'm not asking for them to be elite for 4 quarters, but can they find more stretches of high level play, I guess? Like, when does that need to like change? I guess we're not saying now, right? They can get by on this for a while figuring everything out.
Yeah, I think we were kind of in the same place last year, where it was like, okay, even, the Christmas game, I think we can mark as like like this stuff needs to stop now. And that was obviously like bad stuff was happening. But I think skimming wins when maybe you shouldn't be 7-1 right now, it's gonna prove to be super important, not only for standings later, but for, okay, when you finally do hit a rough patch, you get a bad injury or a couple that stack up, and then suddenly you're like really forcing things and you might take some losses. Like I just think that the basketball season's so long that this doesn't really matter until you start talking before the trade deadline and that kind of thing. Especially if you're winning, because again, they won a bunch of games last year. Don't get that wrong. Um, but it was just in a different light of how we viewed the problems and how things weren't even together. I think their togetherness, again, to go back to that theme, is the big deal. Like Nurk post game, at least on the TV side, was like basically already. I know it's not a big deal because we're so early in the season, but he was basically thanking his coaches and teammates for helping him through a rough start, and he kind of admitted that. And to me, like again, that matters when you need guys to step up at different points. And we're already kind of at the point where it's like, okay, Grayson Allen missed a little time. Nurk missed a little time. Now they're getting back into it. So if Royce goes through a shooting slump, Chris Dunn or not Chris Dunn, Ryan Dunn got hurt. Um, like those guys are gonna have to step up, and that's where we're gonna start to see how good of a team this really is if they just keep winning through these little things that are bumps in the road, I guess.
Yeah, I think it's going to be interesting to see how the dynamic of the team changes when some of those injuries come, to your point. Um, the Dallas game, it felt like they didn't miss a beat. Like Brad, we mentioned that, how Brad and Grayson were out and felt like they didn't miss a beat at all. I thought they really missed Brad in the other game that he missed, which they wound up winning anyway. But it is going to be interesting to see kind of how they adapt and go from there. To kind of go from the pecking order on down, from Kevin to Devin. Book is statistically in one category is off to the worst start of his career. Kevin, oh my God, what's wrong? Is he okay? He's shooting 43.3% from the field. Looking at the first 8 games of his season over this decade he has played in the NBA, this is technically his worst number, but he's had 4 other seasons where he shot 45% or worse to start the year. Typically, he is in that 48, 49, 50, 51 range. And the thing is, if you sort these by true shooting percentage, which factors in threes a little bit more, it balances the equation a little bit more to what's more valuable. It's actually middle of the road for him from an efficiency standpoint. And a couple of positive indicators for him, if for some reason you are worried about this man, which I do not recommend doing, he's made 22 threes through these 8 games. That's tied for the most that he has to start a year. Interestingly enough, Kevin, 3-pointers attempted 63 through 8 games this year. He was at 67 in the Igor year, started 2018, 2018-19. How about that? The Igor was getting through.
Yeah.
Early. He was on it. How about that, Igor Truthers? How about it? The next number is 53. So like there is obvious levels of buy-in here now correlating Igor year when they won, I think, 18 games to this one, but the buy-in there is there. Another number that I like for him, free throw attempts. He's got 58 through 8 games. That is the second most, and the only number less than that was the 65 he had last year to begin the year. Some fun ones: offensive rebounds, 10, tied for the most for him through 8 games, and then steals, 8, tied for the most for him through 8 games. So I think there's some. I know I'm just like throwing numbers at you, naming a bunch of random stuff, but all of that is to say that I think that he has found not other ways to impact the game, but even if he's having bad shooting nights, there's like these statistical sparks that you're seeing that indicate he is buying in just as much as everyone else is. Not that that's what the narrative has become, of course, but you might look at him getting off to what for him is a below average start to the season, and you might like wonder what's going on there. Is he buying in as much as everyone else? That kind of thing. And it's no, I wouldn't worry about him at all. I think that it's been interesting to see. I thought that him and Brad would maybe like switch the big matchup depending on the night defensively, but Brad is just like wholeheartedly embraced that. He talked about how after Monday's game, he kind of saw where the roster was and saw a gaping hole, which was like defensive stopper. And wanted to do that, told the coaches he wanted to do that. And it's gone from there. Like it's very obvious to even the more or the least less knowledgeable basketball fan that when the $50 million guy gets asked to do glue guy stuff, sometimes that doesn't go too well. We're seeing the best version of it at the moment. I think that he's been awesome. I will not go as far as to say, Kevin, that he's been their best player through 8 games. I won't go that far anymore.
Okay.
But he's been really good, and I can't emphasize enough how difficult it is what he's doing. We spent so many offseason pods being like, I don't know, man, this is really hard. They can do it, but it's really hard. And most of it was centered around him and the difficulty of him playing his role. But he's done it so well to the point where I think that it's helped sort of offset a little bit Book's slow start, if you even want to call it that.
We'll get into this number a little bit too, to kind of touch on your point about Book doing the little things. I mean, arguably, he was guarding the number one guy with Paul George coming back against the 76ers. That's probably more because he's more of a forward guy. And there's also a human being named Tyrese Maxey, who that sucks. He got hurt after that game, but deal was on him. And that's just like they're playing pretty good defense with these offensive stars taking these big assignments. And you can look it up at their 8th in net rating, 8th in defensive rating right now. And I didn't even look offensive rating because I assumed they're up there as well. Oh man, are they actually 14th in offensive rating? Yeah.
It's
So
weird. It speaks to what we're saying. If you're watching these games and don't really buy what we're trying to sell in terms of they've been kind of meh for most of these games, look at the offensive rating. Like you watch this team and you think they've been incredible offensively or at least really good. And the numbers say like, they've been fine, whatever.
and honestly, if you eliminate turnovers, that could boost you a couple points there, and then suddenly you're top 10, you're pushing top
Yeah.
5, clean up few little things. I wanted to ask you what you thought on the ease of the offense, even though, again, we mentioned it's not the best or cleanest at times. I think we're going to have the talk about limiting Kevin Durant's minutes because it hasn't really happened like I think both of us thought it would. Same thing with Book to some degree. But Eddie Johnson also did bring this up. The way he's scoring and being used on offense, it's one, allowing him to play better defense, I think, but two, it's not going to be the wear and tear that it really takes on your body when you're scoring 30 tough points versus 30 easy points. If you go look, I think he's like 6th in transition points per game, Books in the top 12 or 15, I believe. So I just like how they're getting, transition, late transition, not like they're the only guys running up the court, but just like, oh, I'm just going to pop a three. That's our offensive possession. That's a pretty good possession if Kevin Durant's popping a three in semi-transition. Like, I just think that has a lot to do with their defensive success. But also like all the other things we're going to talk about if they're being worn out too much and that kind of stuff.
It's close to a moot point from our perspective covering the team. I asked Budenholzer about it before the game yesterday, and he just said it's something we're going to figure out. If Kevin would love to play every minute, like he wants to play every minute he's out there, or every minute possible. I don't know what the breaking point is, but I say moot point again because like if we ask Kevin about it, he's like, yeah, like I feel great. And like this came up last year.
Until they start looking like they're dragging their leg or something. Like that's when it. Or
yeah, it's hard for me to look back at last year and say if I noticed a point where it felt like he was wearing down because everything around the team was so abysmal that it was hard to like pinpoint like, oh, it doesn't seem like KD has his legs today. So it'll be something to monitor, but it is interesting that I think it's more interesting that Budenholzer feels the need to do it right now. And why exactly is that? Is it because that's what Durant wants and he wants to be playing these amount of minutes and he's just not appeasing? Appeasing makes it sound like you're giving like a Hershey's to a 7-year-old. Like it's just developing trust. I'll put it that way. Maybe it's a way of developing trust. Maybe it's, and this is my guess, is that he just wants reps for everyone. And he thinks it's really important for these, as I've been talking about, 10, 15, 20 games while they're healthy, get everyone out there, start to develop something and get that out of the way now. And then we can find those minutes getting down later in the year. Obviously, they haven't played in any blowouts yet, but even you're not supposed to be relying on blowouts to get minutes down. Like that's just not how the math works there. Maybe it is a lack of trust when he is off of the floor. Like I don't really know if I buy that necessarily. Like looking at the numbers so far this year, specifically when he's been on the court as opposed to when he's been off the court. When he's on the court right now, they have a 1.3 net rating. So it's nothing astronomically awesome or anything. And guess what? In the 77 minutes he's been off the floor, they have an 11.9 net rating. They've actually been better with him off the floor. Oh God, here we go. I'm doing the thing again. My agenda is creeping back up.
Yeah, with the stats.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
So it is interesting that like looking at that number just now that they are playing good basketball from a score more points than the other team perspective when he's off the floor for those 77 total minutes this year. And yet he feels the need to keep him on the floor. And like the mechanics of how he's resting the other guys, like Book comes out early, partially because he's going to be in there when Kevin isn't. Like that's part of why you do that, which is interesting. By the way, the other on-off standouts, off the court in 137 minutes for Tyus Jones, 11.1 net rating. That's a little bit interesting for my point guard heads out there. I'm just saying it's a little bit interesting, not to diminish what Tyus is doing. Off the floor, the two worst numbers, Royce, obviously, the plus minus God himself, and then Book there too, which if you've been following Suns basketball for a decade or listened to this podcast at all for a decade, you would know that is almost always a thing.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, that's to me, it's not a big deal. He's at 39 minutes right now. I just looked. But
second in the league. Maxey is the only guy ahead of him, and
yeah. And honestly, I honestly was bringing that up because I'm more talking about like the shots are easier for him. Like he is not putting that much effort into, I guess if there was an effort per point scored statistic that we could come up with somehow, and there was like something taped on his body to do this metric that I'm making up, last year would be a lot worse, is what I'm trying to say. Like until the fourth quarters, he has been just cruising and hitting that many points.
Yeah, it's interesting. Looking at like the rest of the team, we'll just briefly mention, you already mentioned it, but Nurk played really well the last two games. And I think that it's going to be like that, but I don't expect the extremes to be as extreme as they were in the first couple of games of the year. Maybe I'm wrong. If I'm wrong, then that's where you have to explore things. But if the rockiness of that was just like a one-time event, and it's just like, oh, he's not going to play that well some nights, or some nights he's going to play pretty well, because it has been extremes the other way. Like he was fantastic last night. Bam was horrible. Like I don't know how much of that Nurk had to do with, but Bam shot 5 of 21. Like at one point he was like 3 of 18. It was brutal for him. But yeah, Nurk's playing well defensively too. Ryan Dunn, I think like it's kind of like the bull of this year. Like we need to mention Ryan Dunn on the podcast. I don't know how SEO works on podcasts, Kevin, but there you go. Ryan Dunn. He tweaked his ankle, like you said. He had gone 0 for 9 from 3 in his last like 9 attempts across 2 games and a quarter. But then he got open twice last night, took them both instantly, made them both instantly. But then he tweaks his ankle, so we'll see. On him, it's going to be, like you said, interesting to see who gets the next look, because I think Bull played well enough last year, but he is like, coaches hesitate to play guys like him. I'll put it that way. I'll say it nicely, just because of the mistakes he'll make on the floor drive coaches crazy. And Vogel just rode through it because of the impact that he was giving, but he didn't want to do it in the playoffs. Budenholzer hasn't wanted to do it in the regular season yet. And albeit, I should say, like not by necessity, like it hasn't been my necessity. It's not like they've had lesser options to turn to. It's been pretty good players. So will it be him? Will it be Damian Lee? Will it be Josh Okogie? If Dunn is going to miss a couple of games, they're still getting threes up.
Yeah, 43 last night, I believe. I don't really have much on that. Like it's just like, hey, they're doing math correctly now. Everyone else is doing it too, by the way. Um, and I will point out, I think that will benefit them in the as they figure out their center rotation. If Bol or Oso get back in there, which we'll talk in a little bit about whether we think that the rotation expands again at some point, but yeah, I just think that that's going to benefit them when teams start playing them differently as we start seeing more scouting reports roll in and teams figure out, okay, this is how we stop this team. There's going to be some wonky stuff to get the ball out of Book and Katie's hands in some respects, but also the whole point of this season is you shouldn't be able to throw wonky defenses at this team because they have too many guys who can burn you. And that's where I'm kind of excited that we never got to the point the last season to talk about the basketball stuff because like we have enough. We're soon at that point where we have enough on paper. If some teams figure them out for a couple games in a row, then we're going to start to see the Suns react to that.
Do you think it's crazy for me to say that I already think that you can lock them into being a top 20 defense right now?
Yeah, I don't think that's crazy at all.
I just think they're there. I think you see the habits everywhere, and then you see the connectivity that they have. And from everything that we're kind of hearing from them in the story that I wrote, it sounds like they're at a very base level of what they're doing right now. Like Vogel was layering things in throughout the year, but they were also doing a lot, I think, to start the year. And Budenholzer is not doing the opposite necessarily, but I think they're just like no, we're not going to switch as much. Get through the screen.
Yeah.
And
Hey,
and
that's
would
the thing you got to do in this league. Yeah, maybe do.
wouldn't you know it? That helps build. Like it can fail if guys don't get through screens, but guys are getting through screens. Brad is busting his ass to get through every screen. Like that helps the overall picture of everything. But yeah, I don't want to go as far as saying they'll be a top half defense just yet. I want to wait a couple more weeks, but that changes a lot because I think that's the main thing we were worried about is that this could be one of the worst defensive teams in the league. And if that's the case, then the offense has to be incredible in order for them to have really any real shot. But I really feel strongly that there's a good enough base right now to where they'll be below average to decent defensively with the potential to be more based on what we're seeing now. We should say the schedule has been light so far. I would say the Lakers were probably their biggest test so far because the Mavs just played terrible in that game. I know the Mavs are the best team they played so far, but they just missed a bunch of shots. They've got Dallas on Friday, and then they've got Sacramento on Sunday, who I think is like sixth in net rating, I want to say. They're 5-3 right now. OKC is coming up in about a week and a half. That's one that everyone has circled, rightfully so. Um, Weird development there, Kevin. They were awesome defensively last year. Why is everyone like? I know it's because they're doing it at an insane rate right now, but they were really good defensively last year, and everyone's like, "Oh, they're defensive." Without Hardenstein, by the way, crazy. Like the big ad. I know Caruso was the other one, but the biggest ad for them, from an asset standpoint, hasn't even played yet, and they're doing that stuff. It's crazy. So I'm curious to see their defense get tested a little bit more. I'm curious to see. It's been kind of crazy that the pick on rate and stuff has just been like, we're going to pick on Tyus Jones. And then it's like, okay, Royce, get in the game. It's like, okay, who are you picking on now? And like, I guess our team's going to start picking on Book. They haven't really done that yet.
That's the thing to mention here, I think, is Bud has been so quick to move off of Nurk in a bad matchup. And I probably am sounding like a beating a dead horse after last week's pod, but like they're just like, okay, yeah, go sit, Tyus. Like you'll be fine. You'll get in the next game. There will be games where you're a big deal and important, and they don't have anyone to do this to you. And I think that's why I feel better about the defense as a whole because they won't just bash their head against a wall and be like, "Oh, Nurk, you have to play against AD even though it's a bad matchup." Like just move off of him and pick your spots because he can still impact a game in less time. Like I don't. The NBA is so fluid with that stuff now. I think that they'll be fine. And again, it's just based off of sticking to the script, knowing what's being asked of you, and Frank probably put too much on them at once and that just confused them and they were miscommunicating. And we don't see defensively just blown assignments very much at all this season, I think is the big thing too.
Yeah, there hasn't been. That's a really good point. There hasn't been much of like two people staring at each other and being like, "Why did we just do that?
What?
What just happened?" That was the if you had to like put a photo cover on like to represent the season, like have one photo represent their season, it would be Drew Eubanks and Kevin Durant like looking at each other like, "What just happened? What are you doing?"
Yeah.
That would be it. I think that's it. Assists are a little low. I know assist rate is really, really good. Assists are not as high as I would think, and maybe that's just a byproduct of the offense in general, what we were talking about, and it being average instead of awesome. But those numbers have been kind of low. But they look really good, man. And that's the thing is like I think you're going to see a lot of, and I think some of this has already happened, like a um everyone getting their serotonin for national perspective on their local team thing that so many people are obsessed with. You're going to get a lot of that. Like, be ready to eat. Like, don't you have your appetite in a good spot because you're going to get fed right now and you're going to get fed over the next couple of days. But I think within that is like they have plenty of room to grow still. But it's just the big shiny, like they're 7-1. They made these changes and they're working, which is true. But the more tantalizing part of the conversation as we focused on is just like the areas that they can clearly improve on and like the base that they have right now.
Well said. Well said.
Are you okay. How
Yes.
many guys do we have on the Cats this year? How many guys? We had 6 last year. For new listeners, Kevin and I, diehard Arizona Wildcats fans, like my fandom in sports in general has kind of just disassociated, I guess, for lack of a better word. But the Arizona Wildcats are like the one thing where we don't really cover them here. So there's no weird lines crossing there. And I can just be the Homer U of A guy. It's like the only sports that I kind of watch now where I'm emotionally invested with how I react and stuff. So Kevin and I will randomly just turn the end of the podcast into 3 minutes to 7 minutes on the Arizona Wildcats, and you can just shut it off right now if you don't care. We won't be offended. Like our analytics might go down a little bit by the completeness of the listen, but I don't care. You don't care either, right?
Not an analytics guy now.
How many guys we got?
Well, you got three. You got the three perimeter guys: Jaden Bradley, Caleb Love, KJ.
Are we sure Jaden Bradley is like a guy? Like is he
Yeah.
a starting point guard in the Big 12 guy?
Yeah.
Okay, I agree, but I'm just asking.
He's doing the same stuff. I don't know if he's going to develop a three, but
KJ's a guy. That's 3.
he's a guy.
Caleb's the best player in the conference. You get Hunter Dickinson out of my face. No. That's 3.
Okay, so
That's Big 10 as well. Or no, that's Big 12. I'm sorry. I do this all the time. And like I've been doing so well since they moved to the Big 12, but I mix them up all the time. Lauren's gonna get mad that I said that, the resident college basketball fan
is Toby
in our
Walker a
office.
guy? Is he a guy?
Well, no, let's like start up top. I don't let's glance past power forward just a sec.
Okay.
Krivas is a guy, but is he like can he be like their third or second best player some nights behind Caleb? I don't know to that extent. It seems like the draft nuts love him, so there's something I'm not seeing right there. I think Awaka is a guy.
Yeah. I'm
He
worried about
now
like I was a Krivas guy, but I'm a little worried right now.
now there's bias of seeing them play Canisius and who they played before that. I don't even remember, but just like
Point
seeing them against
Loma.
seeing them against like tiny accounting majors like that is where you get worried. Like our world's next lawyers is where like you don't want to buy too much into it for the gigantic man dominating them the way that he did. I think Del Orso, the camel, he's a guy. I think that he's a guy, but he does a couple of things where like he thinks he's a better passer than he is. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Or like some of the passes he's trying, I'm like, just make the right play. Don't try and make the play. You know what I'm saying? I sound like a basketball coach from the 70s, but that's like I got NFL coach speaky there for a second. That was impressive.
I don't know if he's a guy for me.
I think that he's a guy just because he can shoot and he can pass and he rebounds super well. But can he start? No, I don't think so.
No. Um, the wild card
Say it.
is Henry Visar.
You're damn right it is.
It is. He is actually in his third college season. 7 feet, legit, moves pretty well, lanky. He was playing power forward last game. Can shoot. He's the next Grant Jarrett, if you will.
Grant Jarrett wasn't bad. Like it didn't pan out to the way you expect like one of the best recruits in the country to look, but
Yeah.
he ain't bad. Is he the best power forward on the roster?
No, Trey Townsend is.
Okay. I think
Yeah,
what they're going to be asking out of him in the high-low to Bellis role is interesting.
it's interesting
Like
because he can
he's
actually.
skilled, he's skilled and he can do it, but it's not like the Oakland games I watched in the tournament, like they were really good passers and it impressed me. And I thought, like, oh, perfect, he's going to do that. But it was just a little bit of like, where else are you impacting the game if you're not doing that stuff? Like, how much are we running for him on the block? Like, what are we looking for here? I think there's some Tommy Lloyd's going to have to coach a little bit, Kev. And you know how that worries me a little bit. He's going to have to figure out where to utilize him. It's bad we haven't mentioned Carter Bryant yet. He's supposed to be a big part of this team.
He or Townsend, like, it might take time, but one of them needs to be like, I can be your top scorer every third night, I'd say, for this team to have like a good chance. Because like the bigs all have little skills here and there, but they need one guy who's just like, you're going to be spacing the floor, shooting, involved in the offense. And I don't know if they have that.
Yeah, I tweeted at you during the game and was like, is this Conrad Martinez minutes? And then you were like, well, they don't have a backup point guard. And I was like, they sure don't. Okay. They do have one. It's Conrad Martinez. He's like, he could be something. I'm not trying to disparage the young man at all.
What is his
The Carter
nickname?
Bryant thing, by the way, is not shade. I think that he's going to be really good, but it's like figure out how to use him, and you know how you use him. He starts over KJ. Like that's what should be happening. But KJ is more established. He's been here longer. College basketball is college basketball. You can't just have the freshman come in here when KJ grinds it out. He plays great defense, gives us great energy. I love KJ, but
Yeah.
they need what they need. And like Caleb, for the love of God, needs someone next to him that can score. And I hope Bradley can do that. But if he can't, they're going to have to start to explore other options because I don't think Townsend is going to be like an 18, 19 point per game guy in the Big 12. I don't think he's going to be at all.
No, that's a good point. But that power forward slot, you could flex. Carter Bryant could play that, I think. Like he's big enough. Um, so that's going to be the most interesting thing is that slot. Like center is kind of interesting because Krivas should be starting ahead of Awaka soon. But yeah, power forward's the place to watch. Conrad Martinez's nickname, by the way, is El Jefecito, which means the little boss. You didn't know that.
Wow. That's like the Ivan Melendez from the D-backs. Like what is his thing again? Like the Titanic, the Hispanic Titanic. Is that it? It's something like that. That's great. Yeah, they play in a really tough conference. There are three of the top five teams in the country are in their conference, and I've just been kind of confused by people pegging them as like someone who could win this conference. It's like I don't know, man. I think there's a pretty clear drop off between the three or four best teams, but then again, Baylor just got the doors beaten off of it by Gonzaga. So maybe a Gonzaga like an Arizona Gonzaga, not too dissimilar with how they play. There's obviously the Lloyd connection there, so maybe Lloyd ball can work in the Big 12, but as longtime Cats listeners know, little skeptical. And I think what's going to happen is what happened in football, where a random team's going to come out of nowhere, and it's going to be BYU.
They look good. Everyone was watching that game last night.
KY is going to run. I can't believe a professional NBA head coach is in the Big 12. Like he's going to run circles around everyone.
I did see his pre uh season media session, and he was basically like, they were
Yeah.
asking about like recruiting rules and all this. He's like, I don't have anything else to judge it against because I'm new here. So I'm just like, yeah, let's do it. Like he's just coming in and with a lot of money, by the way, and good talent. If Yeah, we haven't talked about this. This is Suns adjacent. if you're curious how the Suns offense should have looked last year, maybe watch BYU. They have some good players too.
Yeah, if you're for some reason like still listening and are a person that is like a KY slanderer who is like, I heard all this hype, top paid assistant and all that stuff, just watch him talk about what he wants to run at BYU for 5 seconds, and you'll tell that that didn't just get done for whatever reason. That was our three favorite words last year for whatever reason.
I
But
don't
yeah, like
know. Oh, for whatever reason. I don't know. That was my 3 words. I don't know.
it was some great three-word combos. I'm just like really curious about this team. I wouldn't say that I'm low on them, but I'm curious. And I think like all those, again, this is the fan part of me where it's like people tweet Sun suggestions at me and they're like, this is so easy. Why isn't this guy playing over this guy? And like I make it sound so easy where it's like this guy should be starting and all this kind of stuff. Like they play Duke in 2 weeks from tomorrow. So I think that's they play Wisconsin a week from tomorrow, and then they play Duke a week from tomorrow. Wisconsin, I don't think it's supposed to be that good, but it's Wisconsin still. Like they're going to have some kind of team, and they were a surprise last year at the end of the year.
Duke might be a
So
problem based on how they handled the other team from the state.
yeah, that didn't go well. That didn't go well for them, huh? Bobby Hurley is going to be great for quotes for the site all year, at least. There's that. All right, buddy.
Good Zoom chat. Thanks for hopping on.
Do you want to share your big news, by the way?
This is my big news.
Your big personal news, big dog, or do you not want to mention it on
Oh,
the
well,
pod?
since you're doing it, yeah. What, child news?
Yeah, brother, number two.
Yeah. I shared it on Instagram. I don't know. Like, no offense to the second child. I was just like, yeah, I guess I should put it on social media so like people like Kellen knows like why I just disappear in a few months. February is the date. Another boy. Two boys in this world, and not looking forward to that for many reasons we won't get into here.
Yeah, for as much as we hate social media in many different ways, it is a very good tool for like the people where like you and I, for example, don't have personal life update conversations even every once in a while. So we're just kind of learning. It's a great tool for those kinds of people who are you're very much your friends, but like when I posted about getting the new show, it's like I told the people that I told, and other people are going to find out that way, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah,
Congratulations. I think I've said it. Did I congratulate you yet? I don't
probably.
know. I would hope so. That'd be poor form on my part if I
I'm
didn't.
not keeping track, dude.
Well, congratulations to you and yours, as I joked to you in the office while we were talking about making decisions about our health insurance. Like maybe stop at 2.
Yeah. And then I said, it turns out children are expensive. Many people
Yeah.
don't know that. Yeah.
Yeah, we're millionaires though, so we're fine. All right, everyone. That's it for this episode. We'll be back next week. Like I said, fun weekend of games. We should have some more high level basketball to get into, and we'll talk about it next week. Goodbye.